What do you want now? She asked, her tone flat, her expression clearly done with his antics as she stood at her locker, pulling out her books. Jungkook always the one to push her buttons, tugged at the straps of her bag, not letting her ignore him. What's with that Dutchman face, huh? He raised an eyebrow, his voice laced with smugness. So, did you write my assignment? Wine smirked, sensing the game he was trying to play. Yes, yes. Wait a minute. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out the assignment he had so carelessly dumped on her earlier. Handing it over without much thought, without a word of thanks, Jungkook snatched the papers and walked off. His cold expression never softening. Wine watched him with amusement. Her lips curling into a sly grin. Oh my, Mr. Jungkook, she whispered to herself, shaking her head. I hope the teacher gives you an E. You will need more than your usual charm this time. With a chuckle, she slung her bag over her shoulder and headed towards class. Mr. Min's physics lecture was next. He was known for his no nonsense attitude, but his passion for the subject was undeniable. As the students settled into their seats, the door creaked open and Professor Min stepped in, his expression as stern as always. Professor Min, alright, class, today we will be delving into the fascinating world of thermodynamics. Especially, we will be discussing the laws of thermodynamics and how energy transfer plays a crucial role in everything around us. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before continuing, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room. Let's start with the first law, the conservation of energy. Who here can tell me how it applies to closed systems? The classroom fell silent as Professor Min's eyes scanned the room. Searching for anyone brave enough to respond, Wine wasn't in the mood to answer. Still, replying the earlier interaction with Jungkook in her mind, she could feel his presence a few seats away, as cold and distant as always, not bothering to raise his hand or engage with the lesson. When no one volunteered, the professor's sharp voice broke the silence. No takers, alright, let's go back to basics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred or converted from one form to another. This is the foundation of the first law. Wine absent mindedly scribbled notes, her thoughts wandering until Professor Min's next question snapped her back to reality. Wine, care to explain how this principle applies to heat engines? Her heart skipped a beat as she realized she would been called out. She straightened up, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze, especially Jungkook's. She catch his smirk out of the corner of her eye as if silently mocking her, but Wine wasn't one to back down. Well, in heat engines, the first law of thermodynamics applies when heat is converted into work. The engine takes in energy as heat and then uses it to perform mechanical work. But some of the energy is always lost as waste heat due to inefficiency. Professor Min gave a curt nod, his stern face betraying a hint of approval. Good, but don't forget the second law. No heat engine is perfectly efficient. There is always an increase in entropy. Wine exhaled, relieved that her answer had been sufficient. Though she could still feel Jungkook's lingering gaze, she glanced over at him only to catch him looking away with his usual icy indifference. She rolled her eye, a smirk tugging at her lips, while muttering under her breath, he thinks he is so untouchable. Jungkook, hearing her quiet remark, didn't respond. Instead, he simply shifted in his seat, the corner of his mouth twitching as if holding back a smile. The rest of the lecture continued without incident. Though one found it hard to concentrate, her thoughts constantly drifting back to Jungkook. The tension between them was like the unspoken law of thermodynamics itself, always present, always transferring from one form to emotion to another. The clock ticked closer to the end of the lecture, and Professor Min closed his book with a sharp touch. His eyes scanned the class with the same focused intensity that had everyone sitting up straighter in their seats. Alright, that's all for today. Kindly everyone submit your assignments on your way out. I will review them tonight and give you your grades tomorrow. At the mention of the assignments, Wine couldn't help but glance towards Jungkook, who sat lazily in his seats, looking unfazed. She smirked, remembering how he had not even said thank you earlier when she handed him his completed work. As the class ended, students began packing up their things, and Wine hurried to leave, wanting to avoid another confrontation. But before she could slip out, Chuguk catch up with her in the hallway. Nice answer in there. Didn't think you would pull it off. His voice was casual, but the glint in his eyes was anything but. Wine stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. What's that supposed to mean? You think I'm not capable of answering a simple question? Jungkook shrugged, his expression unreadable. I just didn't think you would actually pay attention in class, but maybe I was wrong. Wine crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes at him. Maybe he should stop assuming things about me. Maybe he walked past her, leaving her standing there, her heart racing with a mix of frustration and something else she couldn't quite place. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chatter of students as Wine sat at one of the tables, casually picking at her lunch across from her seat. Olivia, her close friend, mid conversation about the latest gossip. Did you hear? Apparently, Mr. Min is the hardest grader in the department. I'm not looking forward to getting those assignments back tomorrow. Wine shrugged, though her thoughts were still partially stuck on Jungkook and his arrogant attitude. Yeah, well, I'm sure someone's going to have a rough time with that grade. She smirked, thinking of how she would pull drop his assignment. Suddenly, a shadow fell over their table, and Wine didn't need to look up to know who it was. Well, well, look who is here. Wine and her little side chick. His voice dripped with mockery as he leaned against the table, his cold eyes locked on mine. Olivia raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet, sensing the brewing tension. Wine, however, wasn't about to let him have the upper hand. What do you want, Jungkook? Her tone was sharp, not bothering to hide her annoyance. Shouldn't you be off somewhere enjoying the assignment I did for you? Chongok smirked, his usual arrogance on full display. Oh, I'll enjoy it alright, but I'm sure you are worried if I will get a better grade than you, or not you. Please, if you get a better grade, it's because of me. You couldn't have written that assignment yourself, even if you tried. His smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only Vine and Olivia could hear. You talk big for someone who's always in my shadow. Vine's eyes flashed with defense. She pushed her chair back slightly and stood up facing him directly. In your shadow, you must be kidding. Her voice was steady, but her gaze burned with fire. If anything, you are the one who keeps coming back to me. You can't handle your own work, so you use people like me to clean up after you. It's pathetic. Olivia's eyes widened slightly as the tension between them spiked, but she kept quiet, trusting Wine to handle it. Chungkook's smile dropped, replaced by something colder. He stepped closer, towering over her, but Wine didn't flinch. Watch your mouth, Wine. Or what? You will try to bully me in front of everyone again? Guess what, Jungkook? Your cold egg doesn't scare me anymore. You want to play games? Fine, but don't think for a second I will just roll over because you are some big shot CEO. Their eyes locked in a silent battle, the cafeteria noise fading into the background as the tension simmered. A few students nearby had noticed the confrontation and were watching with interest, but Wine didn't care. She wasn't about to back down now. We will see about that. His voice was low, but there was something dark in his tone, like he enjoyed the challenge. With a final glance, he turned and walked away, leaving Wine standing there, her heart racing but her expression cool. Olivia let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Wow, that was intense. Wine sat back down, shaking her head with a small smile. He thinks he's untouchable, but not this time. Olivia grinned, clearly impressed. You really know how to push his buttons. Someone has to, she whispered. Good luck tomorrow, Jungkook. You will need it. Olivia, wide-eyed, watched as Wine confidently walked away, speechless for once. As Wine moved further away, Olivia leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. Did you really mess with his assignment? Wine shot her a wink. You bet I did. Next morning, the air in the classroom was thick with anticipation. Professor Min stood at the front, shuffling through a stack of assignments with his usual stern expression. Wine sat at her desk trying to hide her excitement. She couldn't wait for the moment when her little prank would be revealed. Jungkook, on the other hand, was sitting stiffly at his desk, arms crossed, clearly confident that his assignment would sail through like always. Wine smiled to herself, not today, Mr. CEO. Professor Min cleared his throat and the class fell silent. All right, let's get to the point. I have gone through your assignments and I have to say, some of them were quite entertaining. In fact, he paused, looking directly at Jungkook. One assignment stood out in particular. Jungkook sat up straighter, not yet realizing what was coming. Wine bit her lip, holding back a laugh, already imagining the storm that was about to unfold. Professor Min picked up Jungkook's assignment, flipping through the pages. Jungkook, would you care to explain how entropy can be reversed with enough kinetic energy? He raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement on his usually stoic face. The class erupted into laughter, students exchanging confused looks. Clearly finding the absurdity of the statement hilarious, Wine couldn't help it. She burst out laughing, nearly doubling over as Jungkook's face slowly drained of color. Oh, this is better than I thought. Jungkook shot her a deadly glare, but she only grinned wider. Professor Min continued, clearly enjoying himself now. Or here, you say that heat can be transformed into cold energy as long as the particles agree to slow down. He looked up, smirking. Fascinating theory. Chunguk, I have never quite heard physics explained this way. By now, the entire class was laughing uncontrollably. Wine wiped tears from her eyes, struggling to catch her breath. I knew it would be funny, but this is gold. Jungkook's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of his desk. The humiliation was evident on his face, his cool exterior shattered in front of everyone. I'm curious, Jungkook, where did you get these unique ideas? I don't recall reading them in any physics textbooks. Jungkook opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He was fuming, his eyes burning with rage as the laughter of the class filled the room. Wine leaned back in her chair, still grinning ear to ear, feeling absolutely victorious. Wine, in a low voice, unable to resist, told you, Jungkook, you should have written it yourself. Jungkook turned his icy glare toward her, his face a mix of embarrassment and fury. But Wine didn't care, he would gotten exactly what he deserved. As the laughter died down, Professor Min placed the assignment on his desk with a final glance at Jungkook. Well, Jungkook, I expect a rewritten version by next week. And this time, stick to the actual laws of thermodynamics, please. The class continued, but Jungkook remained silent, his face like a storm cloud. Wine couldn't wipe the smile off her face for the rest of the day. The bell rang, signaling the end of the lecture, but Wine barely had time to collect her things before she felt a presence looming behind her. She turned to see Jungkook, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with anger. Without a word, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her up from her seat. Jungkook let go. She yanked her arm, trying to free herself, but his grip tightened. Jungkook, in a cold voice, we need to talk now. Before she could protest further, he dragged her down the hallway, away from the bustling crowd of students and into an empty classroom. He slammed the door behind them, releasing her wrist only when they were alone. Wyatt rubbed her wrist, glaring at him. What's your problem? Jungkook's eyes blazed with fury as he stepped closer, towering over her. You think you can humiliate me in front of the entire class? You think this is some kind of game? Wine? Wine crossed her arms, refusing to back down. It was a game and you lost. Deal with it. Jungkook's fists clenched, his body trembling with barely contained rage. You have crossed a line. He advanced, and in his fury, his hand accidentally catched the collar of her shirt. As she tried to push him away, the fabric ripped with a sharp sound, leaving Wine's shoulder exposed. She gasped instinctively, pulling back to cover herself, but it was too late. Jungkook's eyes widened in shock as they landed on the ink just above her shoulder blade. His name, Jungkook, tattooed in elegant black script on her skin. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rage that had been simmering in his eyes vanished, replaced by sheer disbelief. What is this? Wine's heart raced as she realized what he had seen. Her eyes darted between his shocked expression and the door, panic rising inside her. She quickly grabbed her bag and turned to leave, her hands trembling as she clutched her torn shirt to her shoulder. It's nothing. Forget you saw that. But Jungkook wasn't letting this go. He reached out, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. Wine, wait. She didn't stop. She pushed past him, refusing to look back, her mind racing with embarrassment and frustration. How had everything spiraled out of control so quickly? As she rushed out of the classroom, Jungkook remained frozen, staring at the door long after she would left. Trying to process what he had just seen, his name permanently inked on her skin. He didn't know why or how, but one thing was clear, everything between them had just changed. It had been nearly a month since that fateful day in the empty classroom, and the air between Vine and Jungkook had grown thick with unspoken words. Wine had made a point to avoid him, her heart still itching from the anger and embarrassment of that moment. Whenever Jungkook approached, she would turn away, pretending to be absorbed in her phone or chatting with Olivia. Jungkook, for his part, was frustrated. He felt the weight of her silence like a heavy cloud hovering over him. Every time they passed in the hallways, he wanted to know why she would tattoo his name on her shoulder. But every time he tried to talk to her, she would simply walk away, leaving him even more confused and irritated. One afternoon, as Jungkook was making his way to the campus coffee shop, he spotted Olivia coming out of a nearby grocery store, bags in hand. A sudden surge of hope washed over him. Maybe she could shed some light on what was happening with Vine. Hey, Olivia, can I talk to you for a second? Olivia paused, eyeing him cautiously. She had seen how tense things had been between him and Vine. Sure, what's up? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Why is Vine ignoring me? I have not heard a word from her in weeks. I'm worried I messed things up for good. Olivia glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard before replying. You really don't know? Jungkook shook his head, frustration building. No, what? She loves you, Jungkook. That's why she's been so quiet. She wanted to confess how she felt, but she's terrified you will reject her. His bro froze in confusion. loves me, but why would she tattoo my name on her shoulder? It doesn't make sense. Olivia sighed, her expression softening. She got that tattoo for a reason, but she never thought it would end up like this. The assignment was meant to be a joke, just something funny. She didn't know Professor Min would read it in front of the whole class. That wasn't part of the plan. Jungkook's eyes widened in realization. So she didn't mean to embarrass me. No, not at all. She wanted to say she was sorry, but you didn't listen. She's just hurt because you shouted at her that day. Jungkook felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had been so focused on his anger that he had not considered how Wine felt. I didn't mean to. I just got so angry. Look, she cares about you. Just talk to her. Tell her how you feel. You might be surprised by what she has to say. Didn't mind? Look crossed Jungkook's face. I will, thanks, Olivia. With that, he left Olivia standing there, her grocery bags hanging loosely in her hands. As he made his way back to the campus, heart racing with the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fix things between him and Ryan. The next day, Wine didn't come to school. Chung sat in class, feeling the weight of the previous day's conversation with Olivia. He couldn't shake off the feeling of urgency. He needed to talk to Wine and clear the air between them. After school, he made a decision he would go to her house. When he arrived, he knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A few moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Wine. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion. Jungkook, what are you doing here? Jungkook stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glancing around the familiar living room. It was quiet, too quiet. Where are your parents? They went to work. As the realization sank in, Jungkook's heart raced. The two of them were alone, and he couldn't ignore the tension that hung in the air. Wine moved aside, allowing him to step further into her home. Why didn't you come to school today? She was still trying to maintain her composure, but Jungkook could see the fatigue in her eyes. I was worried about you. I heard from Olivia that you were not feeling well. Wine looked down the topic of her period, making her slightly uncomfortable. Yeah, it's that time. They stood in silence for a moment, Chungo gathering his thoughts, his mind racing with what he wanted to say. Listen, Vine, about everything that happened. I want to apologize for how I react. I was angry and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Wine's heart fluttered at his words, but she remained guarded. It's okay, I should not have messed with your assignment. He stepped closer, locking eyes with her, feeling an unspoken connection spark between them. But the truth is, I have been feeling something for you for a long time. I didn't know how to say it, and then everything happened so fast. I was scared of losing you, her breath hissed, shock washing over her. You really feel that way? Jungkook nodded, his gaze steady and sincere. Yes, I do, and I want to know if you feel the same. Taking a deep breath, Wine stepped closer, her heart racing. I do. I love you, Jungkook. I have loved you for a while now. He felt a rush of relief and happiness flowed through him. But there was still one thing he needed to see. Can I see the tattoo? The one with my name. Wine's cheeks flushed a deep crimson as she realized what he meant. Okay. She hesitated for a moment, her pulse quickening, before lifting the fabric of her shirt to reveal the tattoo just above her shoulder. Jungkook's breath catch in his throat as he looked at it. The sight of his name etched into her skin, sending shivers down his spine. It was beautiful, a symbol of her feelings for him. Unable to contain himself, he leaned in closer, his lips brushing against her skin. As he pressed a gentle kiss on the tattoo, the warmth of his breath sending waves of electricity through her. Wine closed her eyes, feeling a rush of warmth wash over her, her heart racing faster. Jungkook, what are you doing? He pulled back slightly, his gaze intense and searching, eyes flickering between her lips and her eyes. I'm claiming what's mine. You are mine. Why? And I want everyone to know it. Her heart raced at his words, feeling an intoxicating mix of excitement and affection. The air between them cracked with tension as Jungkook leaned in, their faces just inches apart. I want to be the one who makes you happy. You mean everything to me.